Another day is here, and you're ready for it. What to wear? Check. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Check. Planning for what's next and how to save for it? That's where Bank of America can help. For your financial to-dos, Bank of America has experts ready to help get you closer to your goals. Get started at one of our local financial centers or 24/7 in our mobile banking app. Find a location near you at bankofamerica.com/talktous. What would you like the power to do? Mobile banking requires downloading the app and is only available for select devices. Message and data rates may apply. Bank of America N.A., member FDIC.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to the first episode of EPL Market Matrix. Ladies and gents, on the 14th, the Premier League transfer window opens, doesn't it? And on the 30th, clubs have got to do their FFP situations and make sure they've sold, bought, done whatever they need to do to get those balance sheets level. At the same time, there's the Euros, there's a Copa America, there's international games galore, there's camps, wherever it may be. So there is a lot to talk through. And here to join me on the first episode, I am delighted to say, I've got with me a respected journo here to talk about transfer market players and get into specific areas with me. It's Ben Bocsak. Ben, how are we?
Yeah, good to be on. I've got a little bit of a cold, but I'll try to battle through this. And yeah, like you said, it's going to be an interesting period, I think. With the Euros starting pretty much on the same day as the transfer window opens, I'm intrigued as to how much activity there will be, because there's going to be a lot of players away on major competition, not just at the Euros, but with Copa America as well.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because it's going to be a hard one because, like you say, there's players away on international duty, and we know international teams, especially in tournaments, are going to be on lockdown. It's not going to be acceptable for people to come in and out, to do medicals, deals, anything like that. At the same time, certain clubs, as we know, have got the pressure of that 30th of June deadline, don't we? We know certain clubs have got to do deals or make sure their balance sheet is as it should be to whatever the losses are allowed nowadays. So, yeah, it will be an interesting little period. Right, Ben, this week, or as we say, Ian, say it to everyone, we'll do focus areas. So we've got a bit of a special this week, and the focus is a bit more towards Eastern Europe. So we're looking at players from Hungarian international, Slovenia, Georgia, but we'll bring it back round to an England international because we'll bring a hot topic each week at the same time as well. So, Ben, there seems one place to start. Now, let me get this right, as obviously a man with Hungarian ancestry. Milos Kerkez, maybe I missed the Z at the end, Hungarian international. Now, it's important to bring him into the mix, Ben, as our first one to visit. Bournemouth left back, obviously moved from AZ Alkmaar last year, had a very good breakout season, if you want to call it that, in the Premier League for Bournemouth. Thinking, why are we mentioning him? There's a lot of stories, particularly with a couple of clubs. Arsenal I mentioned, but I think it's fair to say United seem to be the big one in the mix. We've got to explore his metrics. We've got to explore these stories. I mean, I know he's a player you like, Ben. What do his metrics tell us about how well he's done this first season for Bournemouth?
I think the most impressive thing I've seen is out of under 21 defenders, he's played the most minutes out of anyone, 1,900 minutes in the Premier League.
Wow.
That's the most out of any under 21 defender. So he's clearly played a lot of minutes, not a regular starter. I mean, he has started most games for Bournemouth, but he was sort of in and out of the team a lot of the times. Obviously got a 3-game suspension as well, which didn't help towards the end in terms of his minutes could have been a lot more potentially as well. but that stands out for me. And then, I mean, the other one that sort of stood out to me is if you're looking at under 23 left backs in the league, Y-Scout puts him at the top for the successful defensive actions at 9.85 per 90. That's above like the likes of Destiny Udogie at Tottenham, Levi Colwill, and a few other players as well who are sort of rated really highly. Again, obviously, those metrics will be skewed by the fact that at Bournemouth, you'll probably have to do a lot more defending than potentially at Tottenham. I'm not sure if that's the same at Chelsea. I think at Chelsea, you probably face sort of similar amount of defending to do, especially last season. So for me, his defensive metrics are really good. He's a really good defender. I've interviewed him in the past, so I think the area of his game that he's trying to work on more is his offensive game, and something that the metrics will not highlight, but the last few weeks of the season, last sort of month or so, he was involved in forcing 2 own goals for Bournemouth, which obviously don't get registered as assists, so he's getting better in that regard. I was just in Dublin this week, saw him in action. It was interesting to see him for Hungary sort of played as an inverted fullback coming into the centre a lot of the times. I think one thing that he definitely needs to improve in is a bit of his awareness and his sort of positional understanding. A lot of the times he's a sort of just he's so full of energy, he can sort of be trapped and be exposed sometimes. But he's still very young, so he's got a lot of development and a lot of time to sort of get better in that area. I think for me, obviously Manchester United, you mentioned it, they're the team who are interested in him, and they also need a left back. I think if in a normal world, I would say it'd be wise to stay at Bournemouth for another year, work before he makes that jump. But United seem desperate for a left back, and the left back market is a difficult market right now. There's not a lot of talented players, so Milos is up there in terms of being one of the most talented young left backs in European football, and at the same time, he's someone who idolised Nemanja Vidic growing up. Obviously, he's got Serbian ancestry, so because of that, he really looked up to Vidic. His dad is a big United fan, so obviously the pull of United as well might be a little bit difficult to turn down as well, being so closely aligned. But on top of that, it's not just United who are in for him. I know Chelsea are also interested, and they've followed him closely as well. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins the race. But I certainly think United are the most likely to get him because of those affiliations. His dad met with Ten Hag at Old Trafford when United played Bournemouth as well. So, by all accounts, it seems like Ten Hag is staying. So again, that seems to suggest, that there's a good link there.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, like you say, when you look at his stats, the defensive metrics do profile well. And it's interesting you say about the own goal creation, because probably the one thing that you think, especially at a top club, is going to be focused on. There's only one assist in his column that way. So yeah, obviously, especially in the modern game, you want your fullback doing things both ways. Although it's interesting, like you say as well, for the clubs, because you do think Chelsea better. You think, well, they can stick Colwill there. They've got Ben Chilwell, haven't they? They seem to have quite a few options at left back, which is interesting. At the same time, you look at United, and Luke Shaw is obviously the senior left back you fancy, but his injury problems are well known. And speaking of injury problems, Malacia, I think it's pronounced, their other young Dutch left back. I mean, he's practically missed the whole season. So in terms of a pure need, I think it makes sense completely which one probably has the greater need is the right phrase more than anything. And I think we've got to be honest, one might well have an FFP issue, shall we say, potentially, as opposed to the others. So that brings it into question as well. Ben, this one's a weird one because it seems like quite a bargain fee they got him from Alkmaar for last year. And obviously, if he is going to go to like one of the big clubs like a Chelsea, United seems more nailed on, like you say, because you feel he could almost develop under Luke Shaw. He wouldn't have to play week in, week out, almost like not a giant step, but the next big step in his development. What sort of fee do you reckon we could be talking? Because there's a lot. If you read the reports, I mean, I'm seeing anywhere between 50 to 20 million, to be honest. But like you said, the left back market, a bit like the sixth market, they tend to be worth more because there's not that many good ones around. Supply and demand, isn't it? In such. What do you think we could be looking at if he does make the move to one of these Premier League clubs?
Yeah, I think this could be the stumbling block for United, depending on their budget, because it's one thing saying the player might be open to a move. United might want him, but there is another team in discussion here, Bournemouth, and they signed him as a really exciting prospect. It was a bit of a coup for Bournemouth to get him. He got 12 goal contributions from left back in his final season at AZ Alkmaar. He was really good that season. So I think the 20 million fee is very low. I don't think Bournemouth will probably want double that, and the lowest they might go, I think, is 30 to 35 million. I can't see them going. He's on a long-term contract. Like I said, he's played the most amount of minutes out of under 21 defenders in the Premier League. That shows you the sort of talent he is in comparison to his peer groups. And for those reasons, I don't think Bournemouth will be willing to let him go on the cheap. They signed him as a big project signing. On top of that, Lloyd Kelly is leaving on a free transfer as well.
Yeah.
So, he was sort of filling in at left back at times. So, it's not like they're spoiled for choice at left back either. So, they won't make it easy for United, I don't think.
Yeah, it will be an interesting one. Like you say, Lloyd Kelly leaving on a free. Everyone suspects he's going to Newcastle. That does leave them very short of cover, the easiest way to say it. So they're not going to let him go without, real money to bring in a replacement, if not a couple of projects like Bournemouth do. And as much as we hear about United's style of woe and their finances, it is Manchester United still, so they're not going to be allowed to do that deal on the cheap. You almost feel it might come down to, does Kerkez force it a little bit if that is on the table? But definitely one to keep an eye on this summer. And this one, Ben, there's not a day goes by. So we did the Hungary International, we'll move to Slovenia here. There's not a day goes by this kid isn't in the paper linked with a Premier League club. And you know who I'm talking about. United, Chelsea, Arsenal, the same names time and time again. Benjamin Sesko. I think it's fair to say as well, people will start to be like, who is this kid? Around Europe, this was the informed forward, wasn't he, at the end of the season? And it's right to say, people who don't know too much about him, a spectacular end to the season with Leipzig. 21 years old, sorry. Ben, I mean, I'm guessing, I might be wrong, you might tell me different, but I'm guessing the metrics for this kid, especially the way the curve's gone upwards at the end of the season, are pretty special in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not a surprise if we're looking at under 23 goal conversions out of forwards in Europe's top 5 leagues. Sesko is top with 28.5%.
Wow.
That's a really high percentage. I mean, anything above 15% is quite good. Above 20 is really good, and above 25 is like, wow, that's really, really good. So just to put it for comparison's sakes, Erling Haaland is second on that list with 24.2%. And then, so he's sort of done better than Haaland in terms of goal conversion. And it's not a new thing. If we're looking at I remember writing about him 3 years ago when he had his debut season at Liefering. And he had the best sort of shot on target percentage in the league at that time in the Austrian second division. I've interviewed people who worked with him at Salzburg and in Slovenia as well. They all sort of pointed out and highlighted just how good he is in terms of his finishing, how much he practices that side of his game. He stays behind, and I think one coach said there wasn't a day in training when that he didn't stop to do extra sort of practicing and finishing skills. So
wow,
he is really a top sort of marksman in Europe's top 5 leagues. Obviously, if you're looking at just his overall goals scored, I think it's only 11 in the Bundesliga, so maybe you're not seeing the full picture. But if you're looking at per 90 minutes and the chances that he's given and the chances that he takes, you really get to see just how good he is. And I think he's 2003 as well, isn't he? So around the same age as Kerkez, so still very young as well, and a lot of potential. And I think the frightening thing about him is it's not just his finishing. This season in the Bundesliga, he was in the top 15 players for top speed. His average top speed over his career, he's sort of racked up, I think the highest he's had is around 36.23 kilometers per hour. And that's, you're talking about one of the fastest players in Europe at that. With that kind of top speed, that's around Kylian Mbappe, Alphonso Davies levels of speed that he has, which just makes him a really frightening sort of player to face for a defender, because he's not just lethal in front of the box, inside the box. He can run in behind defenses, and he was really good at that from a young age. And he's very multi-layered in that side of things. And on top of that, I spoke to a coach actually last week who was telling me about how obsessed he was with basketball, and I actually wanted to be a basketball player because he's really tall as well. That's something I forgot to mention. He's, I think, 1.97 meters or 6 meters, which is around 6'4", 6'5", around that sort of height. So it's really tall. And there was a time when he was doing both basketball and football in Slovenia, and he had to choose. He chose football, which is probably the right decision for him.
Yeah.
And but he's still very obsessed with basketball. I think when he moved to Leipzig, he sort of set up a basketball court in his house there. So it'll be interesting to see if he can do the same if he moves to England, because when I've spoken to his coaches, they've all said his dream is the Premier League. So a bit similar to Milos Kerkez, in the sense that, Milos probably, the fact that United are interested in him makes it a more attractive prospect. Same with Benjamin. I think, maybe the best decision for him would be to stay at Leipzig for another year, since he he wasn't a regular starter, just like Kerkez. However, the fact that, again, the number 9 market isn't the greatest either, and the fact that this is his dream to play in the Premier League makes it a little bit more attractive. And maybe you don't make what I would say is the more sensible decision to stay, but actually you go and risk it and you go to a bigger club.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end,
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
It's an interesting one, like you say, because his goals, 18 goals, people might look at that and go, it's not a ginormous number, but it's all about, as we said, that end of the season. I mean, he scored in his last 8 games in a row, didn't he? And they were going in from everywhere, and not just long-range blammers. We're talking nice tap-ins, controlled finishes. Like you said, he's a big player in the air as well. But the minutes, I mean, just over 2,000 minutes in all competitions, so we've really seen that curve leap that way. And also, a few things you mentioned, like he's come through that Red Bull Academy. It's important to say he went Salzburg to Leipzig, and now it almost feels like, what is his next best move? As we said there, the smart money might actually say, do another year in the Bundesliga, get that under your trade, hit 20-plus goals, and it'll really strengthen you. The market dictates these things, as we know, Ben. And the big thing that a lot of sources have revealed, he's got that release clause, hasn't he? It actually depended, I know on the release clause, interestingly, how well he did. So the better he's done, the higher release clause has pushed it up, which Red Bull won't be too upset about. Because if someone meets the release clause, there's nothing they can do about it. It is important to talk about that, Ben, but because the suggestion is this release clause is about 65 million euros. If he does come to the Premier League, let's be honest, it's going to be a Premier League club that triggers it. We've seen all the names. We've seen Arsenal, we've seen Chelsea, we've seen Manchester United. Arsenal and United seem more prominent. Would you have a concern for him in the sense of not his talent, but if he comes to Arsenal, everyone will be looking and saying, are you that final number 9 who's going to push them to the title? Are you going to replace Jesus up top? He's also, if he goes to Arsenal, let's be honest, with his frame and his style and where he's come from, everyone's going to be saying, are you as good as Haaland? Are you as good as Haaland? If he goes to United, people will be like, oh, well, we wanted a more experienced one possibly because, Rasmus Højlund's not quite worked out, not in the terms of his potential, but you want a more experienced forward. I know the money often sways it, and I get that completely. Do you see risks, though, in him coming to the Premier League that way?
I think I said it, yeah. I think there is a bit of a risky element always when you're a young player and you're making a move, because you just, he's just settled down towards the end of the season in Leipzig. I think it would suit him well to stay another year and to really sort of break into the starting 11 properly and have a full season in the starting 11. But at the same time, when they are big clubs like Arsenal and Manchester United calling us, that's a difficult decision to make. I think quality-wise, absolutely, he's probably ready to come into those sides. But I think maybe it's just like the mental side of things. Is he ready in that aspect? Because when I was speaking to his coaches, one of the things that they highlighted is this sort of his mentality sort of reminded me of Darwin Núñez a little bit. It's like he almost wanted things when he came to Salzburg and Liefering a little bit too soon, too early. Like he was very quickly dissatisfied with himself in terms of not getting things right. He always wants to be at one step ahead, and sometimes in your development you need to take a step back actually and slow down and make sure you get everything, you learn everything first before you try to pull off certain finishes, certain sort of drills, certain stuff. So I am concerned in that aspect of things about him. Like, is he really ready to sort of make that step in that side, in the mentality aspect of it? Because that's just been something that was flagged up to me as the coaches had to take care of and had to sort of make sure that he didn't get discouraged at times in training sessions. So yeah, I would be a little bit concerned in that area. But quality-wise, like, he's definitely suited to both of those sides, even though they play completely different football. But
Yeah.
you know, probably United a little bit more in the way that Ten Hag has, well, I don't know if he's actually pulled it off, but he wants to play sort of counter-attacking football. And I mentioned his speed, his ability to get in behind defenders. So if Ten Hag can get that right, then Sesko would be as almost perfect fit for United. But even Arsenal, you know, he's got that physical aspect. He's got that ability inside the box. He's actually very gifted technically as well. He's very good on the ball. He can sort of beat players 1v1 and drop back and link up with his teammates. So I think he'd suit Arteta's style of play as well. So both teams, I think he would be good for. But it's just that mental side. It's a lot to take on for a young player, maybe for a lot of money at such a young age. But at the same time, you know, he's been doing that from a very young age. He moved very far away from home in Slovenia to go to a bigger club in Slovenia. Then he obviously moved to Austria again, away from home, living alone. So, you know, he's sort of gradually made those steps, but obviously he's never made, I think, such a huge leap from Leipzig to certainly two of the biggest clubs in the Premier League, or up there among the biggest clubs.
Yeah, will be interesting. At the end of the day, money will talk. And what all those clubs know when they're evaluating him is, you've got to say it again, there is that release clause. So they know exactly how much it'll take, probably the package overall, if they want to bring Sesko to the Premier League. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Sticking in sort of Eastern European realms, Ben, this one, and my apologies to Georgian fans straight away, because I'm probably mispronouncing this, but I'm going for it, with Georgi Marmadashvilli, I think it's pronounced. So, Ben, this goalkeeper, Valencia, keeps getting linked repeatedly with an interesting club, Newcastle. So Geordie's probably worth sort of pinning your ears back for this one. That does seem to be the club that keeps coming up. I mean, you look at his contract, and he's still got a few years left to go. The one thing that strikes me, Ben, before we even get into the metrics is this player's talked about moving as well. He's quite public in essence as well. You'll see, I've seen quite a few interviews where he's mentioned it as well. What do the metrics tell us about this? I don't want to say kid, because he is 23 years old. So what do the metrics tell us about Marmadashvilli?
He's a very, very good goalkeeper. So if we're looking at La Liga goalkeepers this season, he ranks third for the most prevented goals per 90. The two players that rank above him is Andre Lunin, who was Real Madrid's goalkeeper. Had a very good season. And then actually it's Philip Jorgensen at Villarreal, who slightly ranks above him by 0.01. Sorry, 0.001. So both of them average technically 0.919 prevented goals per 90, but Jorgensen just ranks just slightly above him. So he's had a very good season. Very reliable when it comes to his shot stopping. He's good at coming out in one versus one situations. He's strong in the air. Very sort of tall goalkeeper, physical as well. And I know some people have highlighted potentially his passing, his distribution as an area of weakness, but I think it's just the way Valencia play. He comes from Dinamo Tbilisi in Georgia, and actually that academy, the academy director for the club is a coach who was at La Masia in Barcelona's academy for 19 years, and he actually worked with Lionel Messi, Xavi, Busquets, and he's sort of introduced this short tiki-taka, typical Barcelona style of play, where the onus is very much on goalkeepers needing to play out from the back and distributing the ball from the back, and that's the kind of style of play that he's being brought up in the academy. So I think his sort of passing numbers are poor or not as frequent. I mean, his completion is good. It's just, it's not a high volume, but I think that's just because of the way Valencia play rather than any real concern in terms of his distribution. I think his completion is still quite good. So, I wouldn't be too concerned over that for Newcastle fans.
It's an interesting one as well, because, I mean, he's got a contract till 2027, so he's 3 years left to go on it. Like you said, not bad stats as their pure level goes. I mean, he conceded 41 in La Liga, but that's from 37 appearances. The fee, Ben, because, a lot of the stories have got that Newcastle are in hard for this, and people will be thinking, well, hold on, what about Nick Pope and him coming back? So does he not, does Nick Pope, does he compare in that regard? The fee seems to be suggested around £35 million. I know Valencia haven't had the greatest season, it's fair to say, but 35 million, does that seem reasonable from what you'd say for Marmadashvilli?
I think so. Maybe it's a little bit on the higher side, but, he is very young still, showing a lot of potential. Like you said, he conceded 41 goals, which is quite high, but at the same time, he's prevented a lot of goals as well.
Yeah.
It's just Valencia didn't have a great season, so he did face a lot of those situations. I think he still came out relatively on top in terms of his ability, and I think he's someone who's shown at international level as well how good he is and how reliable he can be. I spoke to a scout who actually worked for Dinamo Tbilisi, and he's now working in Belgium, and he's Georgian, so he follows the national team quite a lot. And I asked him who's the most important player, and people tend to speak about Kvaratskhelia as the most important player, but he actually mentioned to me, no, actually I think Marmadashvilli is the most important player for Georgia, and that highlights, it's very rare that a goalkeeper gets mentioned the most important player for any team. So it sort of highlights his quality, and I think he's got a lot of potential. And if Newcastle do get him, I think it's a really exciting transfer.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one for Geordies, because you will be able to watch him in the Euros for however long Georgia are in it. So we'll see how he gets on, but definitely one to keep an eye on. And the final one, Ben, I mean, we bounced around there. Hungary, Slovenia, and Georgia. We were the mix, obviously, of Germany, Spain, and other leagues, but might as well come back home. And the reason we're coming back home, this is probably the hottest local story, I'd say. And what I'm saying by that, people, is I'm sure you've seen the headlines or the news, Conor Gallagher. And it's an important one to discuss, because David Ornstein had one of his bombs that he dropped yesterday, that Aston Villa are in preliminary discussions with Chelsea about Conor Gallagher. Now, I mean, a lot of people will know this, Ben. All last season there was talk about his contract. He'll only have a year left to go in the summer. Pochettino talked about it relentlessly. However, Pochettino's no longer with Chelsea, naturally. And Spurs have been long-time admirers. That's well known. Suggests they had a bid last summer that couldn't meet it. A lot of the stories have got Chelsea demanding 50 million, which almost feels a bit like Mason Mount, doesn't it? Rewind, Mark 2, whatever you want to call it, from that. I mean, it's an interesting one, because I hear people say stuff about Conor Gallagher. I see a lot like real talented, got a case for an England start. And then some people go, he's a rubbish player, blah, blah, blah. What do the metrics tell you about Conor Gallagher specifically?
I think he's really underrated. So because Aston Villa seems the most prominent team that he could go to, I compared him to Aston Villa's best midfielder, in my opinion, who's John McGinn. And if you're looking at offensive contributions, goals and assists, Gallagher has 0.35 per 90. McGinn has 0.30. Passes to the final third, Gallagher again beats McGinn. He beats him for key passes as well. I think attempted take-ons, McGinn just edges him, but pretty much most things, in terms of offensive output, Gallagher has the better of McGinn. And McGinn is, if we're asking Aston Villa fans, probably value that around the same figure. If anyone wants him, let's say if Manchester City for some reason were to come in for him, Aston Villa would probably quote at least 50 million for him. But
yeah,
this season, in a worse side than Villa, Gallagher has sort of put up similar, if not slightly better, offensive stats than McGinn. And on top of that as well, his I think his off the ball work rate is it goes really under the radar. So if we're looking at tackles in the opposition's defensive third, or if they're attacking third, Gallagher has 17 tackles in that area, whereas McGinn only has 7. And again, for recoveries, Gallagher has 221 recoveries, whereas McGinn only has 161. So his off-the-ball work rate goes unnoticed as well, but I think it's really up there. He's really good. He's got a lot of energy, and he does a lot of the sort of dirty work off the ball.
Yeah.
The kind of thing that I think maybe fans don't notice as much as, you know, the goals or the nice take-ons, the nice sort of progressive runs and stuff like that. These sort of recoveries and off the ball work goes under the radar, but it's really important. And I think you know, he's still quite young, born in 2000, so I think it would be a really good move for Aston Villa. I think he would strengthen Villa's midfield.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like you say, I mean, he's got 5 goals. A few of those are penalties, but 7 assists. Does pick up quite a bit similar to McGinn in that sense. Does pick up quite a few bookings, so ended the season on 8 in that regard. But by nature, putting himself about a bit that way, like you said, 24 years old, so it feels prime age. Do you get the feeling, Ben, it's going to come down to... It feels like Chelsea are going to have to sell. I mean, just in case people weren't aware. And funnily enough, this is the one that I wanted to press you on. Sky Sports in the last hour, and people have known this, it's not a brand new revelation, but who are the FFP, the PSR clubs that are an issue? And they've named them. They've actually said, amongst the 6, Chelsea and Villa. Does that make you worried for Villa at all? And what I mean by that is that it seems to be Tottenham or Villa are Spurs or Villa are the clubs in for him. Spurs are not mentioned as having FFP, PSR issues, where Villa are, we know Chelsea are, and driving a bit of an auction. He's also a London boy. I know we always talk about metrics here. If you look at his loan history, he's chosen Charlton previously. He's chosen Palace. He very much seems to be a London at-home boy. Do you think this could sway it more towards Spurs, or would you still steer towards Villa in that regard?
Definitely. I also think, as well as I think he would be a good signing for Villa, you know, they've got Jacob Ramsey coming back, they've got a lot of good midfielders who can sort of play similar. Even McGinn is relatively similar to Gallagher. So to Gallagher, sorry. So I don't know if there's, considering they have FFP issues, I don't know if spending 50 million on Gallagher, even though he's a good player, is the sort of wisest decision for Villa. Maybe there are other areas where they could strengthen more, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily worried too much about Villa's financial problems, because I think they might be able to make a couple of big sales this summer. So I don't think they'll be too concerned. Plus, there's also a Champions League money coming in, which is going to help them massively next season. So yeah, I mean, the London thing is interesting, because I think one of his... He went to... I think the furthest away he's been is Swansea, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's still sort of down south, but it's a few hours away from London, but he's never sort of ventured to the Midlands or anything further than that up north. So it would be interesting to see if that plays a decision. I think it might. He does seem sort of... Wasn't he linked to Liverpool a few years ago? And he did seem sort of reluctant to sort of move up north. So there might be something in that.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. It might require all of Emery and Monchi's skill. However, Big Ange might win the day. Either way, the smart money says that Conor Gallagher departs. But then again, it's Chelsea, so would it surprise you if they did a renewal nothing makes rhyme or reason, does it, at Stamford Bridge? So, yeah, he is very much one to keep an eye on, especially before the 30th of June. So all it leaves me to say, ladies and gents, is we've been around Eastern Europe and we've come all the way back to these shores. So, Ben, for the time, the metrics, the insight and discussion, thanks for your time, pal. It's much appreciated.
Thank you for having me on, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, there'll be plenty more to come from that, ladies and gents, because that was an episode of EPL Market Metrics.
Sports Social Podcast Network.